New year, same podcast. What, did you think you were going to get growth and development or resolutions on this podcast? On the Pod People? Nah.
That's some silly shit.
That's some silly shit. And you know what? I'm smiling. I'm smiling about that silly shit. Matisse Van Rossum, I'm here to give you New Year's curses.
Ooh.
I'm Ben Sheets, and I'm smiling about having 2022 behind us.
I'm Cleveland Mosier, and I'm Caterpillar Pilled.
Caterpillared, if you will.
That's right. Speaking of cats, y'all see my cat mustache?
Oh, shit.
Uh-oh.
Well,
I haven't, but I did get this nice train set.
Whoa! Train set! Thanks, man!
why don't you open that
Awesome!
up?
I'm gonna open it right up, right now. Oh, God.
Well, it's 2023. It's a new year, but before we can look into the future, we have to take one last look back over our shoulder into the past, into 2022, which was in many ways the year of the smile. And in our final 2022 wrap-up that I have curated for us since I won last year's predictions, we're talking about two films. And the first one we're going to start by talking about is, of course, Smile, which was written and directed by Parker Finn and stars Kevin Bacon's daughter, Sosie Bacon. Not Susie, Sosie.
Oh.
This was Parker Finn's directorial debut, and an unexpected hit. I think this made something like $200 million at the box office.
Commercially very successful. Well, I remember when we saw the previews for this in theaters very early in the year, and we were all kind of like, what the fuck is this? This looks like a joke.
But it's gonna make a lot of money.
No, I think, well...
I thought I certainly thought it was gonna make a lot of money.
I didn't think it was going to make that much money.
I didn't think it was going to make a lot of money, but I did kind of think that, you know what, that movie's going to turn out to not be as bad as it looks. I was glad to be right about that.
I'm so happy that this movie was really successful, because this is filling a gap in recent cinema that is sorely missed, and that's like the mid-budget, high-concept horror.
Yes.
And I feel like we don't get many of those anymore. They're either indies or they're big-budget Conjuring 27 franchises.
Certainly, those are the only types of horror films that make it into theaters anymore.
Yeah.
So I really hope that Smile's success will encourage Hollywood to go back to the formula of mid-budget horror.
In a way, it already has. Paramount, who put out this movie, was so happy with the results of this that they hired someone specifically for putting out more mid-budget horror.
Hell yeah.
With high concepts. So,
well, I would also argue that Malignant kind of filled the same niche the year before. I mean, James Wan obviously has a lot more clout to his name, so that's going to be a little bit of a safer bet. Somebody like Parker Finn just does not. But I'm also kind of hopeful for Megan coming up, Mithrigan. I think that could also land somewhere in the same area, as long as it doesn't fucking stink, which, we'll find that out next week, one way or another. But, yeah, man, Smile was a pleasant surprise. It is not doing anything revolutionary by any means. In fact, I would argue that it just is kind of It Follows, but dumber.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's okay. And the result is a movie that is pretty good, not great.
It's a lot of fun.
It is fun, and it does a few things really well. I think it has some problems, and it's flawed, but the reason I wanted to talk about it is because it is a weird mid-budget horror movie that came out and made a shitload of money and wasn't dismal.
Yeah.
So the first thing we should talk about is what this film is in the vein of. Because we had a good chat about it while watching it the second time earlier, but Ben, you weren't there for that. So let's dig into that a little bit. I think, to summarize this movie, it is a early to mid-aughts kind of monster film where there's a sort of a high concept thing to it. But it is given a light veneer of A24-y elevated horror vibes.
You can tell that it kind of wants to be elevated horror, but the script doesn't quite lend itself to that. It's trying.
But where it tries, it succeeds, and in the places where it would have failed, it doesn't try that. And what I mean by that specifically, what I mean by veneer of elevated horror, is the soundtrack is a good place to start.
The score is great.
The score fucking rips. And it's
way above the quality of the rest of this film, I think.
But I will say, though, that, like, for as A24-y as this score is, it doesn't have that problem that Firestarter did, where the score is, like, fucking awesome, but what's on screen doesn't really compete. Like, I feel like the score does, like, actually elevate everything that's going on screen.
It doesn't feel dissonant.
Right. And, which is funny, because musically, it is very, like, industrial and dissonant and obscure and strange.
Well, yeah,
like,
it does, in the vein of It Follows, it does feel like it's still trying to do that, both in premise, but also in some of its presentation. The music is notable, because It Follows has that incredible Disaster Piece score that I still go back and listen to all the time.
Yeah, and while, like, the cinematography is relatively standard. We were talking about that. A lot of the dialogue shots are fairly flat and stuff. There's some cute editing things where things go upside down, to indicate, like, smiles and stuff.
It tries some things every now and then, but for the most part, I think the cinematography feels like they're playing it very safe. A lot of it's very flat. Most of it's not particularly dynamically lit. Dialogue is a lot of shot, reverse shot, two shots, that kind of stuff. Plays it very safe.
I think
that works in its benefit.
I agree.
I do too.
I agree, and that's a good place where, like, again, it feels more like a mid.
A movie like this, it would feel wanky if the story was just kind of. It would feel pretentious if the story was just kind of mid, like it is, and then it was trying to do, like, all of this really crazy camera work and production design and stuff. It would feel wanky, I think.
I agree. Now, the one place where I do think it's elevated again is color correction. I love the color of this movie. The palettes are fairly rich but muted. Particularly in the hospital ward sets, those like kind of light pinks and soft blues. There's a lot to look at and enjoy, and it's all very controlled, and it shows a lot of skill and mastery in color correction. So I was quite pleased. And again, if this was an early to mid aughts movie, the whole thing just would have been blue or teal, and that would have been it. And so that was nice to get. Like, even during, like, scenes where we knew what was happening, what was coming, there was always something for me to enjoy, whether it was, like, the color palette or the score or even laughing at some of, like, the hokey performances.
Yeah.
Like, there's always something to like.
The cinematography is very safe, but the production designer put a little bit of stank on it.
Yeah, and I think what elevates it beyond, like, its pretty basic story is both its execution. Like, a lot of the beat-to-beat things are really well executed. I think of the jump scares being pretty good in this movie for the most part. Like,
there's too many of them, but they're not as
overly cheap. There's a lot of them.
There's not as cheap. There's too many jump scares, but they're not as cheap as what you would expect from a movie. Some of them are pretty effective.
I wasn't ever bothered by them, I think, just because the score was setting them up for, a pretty good shot.
Yeah. I wasn't as much when we watched it the second time, obviously, because I was expecting them. When we were watching it in theaters, I started getting a little tired of the jump scares. There were a few too many. I'm like, all right, I get it.
This movie also has, like, a dark sense of humor to it that I really appreciate quite a bit. Like, the birthday scene is a great example.
Yep.
But even after that, when she, like, comes to confront her sister, we get that amazing shot where she's, like, screaming in the SUV, and then it cuts to the kid.
No, it does a slow pan across the yard into the window where, like, her nephew is just, like, watching. It felt like that almost felt like an Adult Swim bit, kind of. Her just having, like, this screaming meltdown in her car, and then just panning slowly over to just, like, a stone-faced child, just like...
It's perfect, because if you're, like, not irony poisoned, you might actually find it kind of creepy.
If
you are, like, it's hilarious. So, like, everyone wins.
This is maybe kind of an obscure reference, but what that shot reminded me of very particularly is a little bit in fucking Pineapple Express after Seth Rogen and James Franco have like their big fight where they like separate for a little while, and there's a shot of James Franco sitting on a swing set like weeping while he's shoving a hamburger into his mouth, and there's just like this little fat girl in a bathing suit just like standing behind a fence just like watching him. It's like it has that same kind of energy to it of,
Well, she does have a sad hamburger.
Yeah.
she does, yeah, and the main character in this does have a sad hamburger moment. So, you know, double parallels to
Crazy.
Pineapple Express.
Damn, that movie came out like 15 years ago.
Yeah, Pineapple Express came out a long time ago. Still one of my favorite stoner comedies.
It's very good.
I watch it every year usually. But I do think to sort of go back to like the darkness of this movie, I think one of the things that really saves it is that they were like, fuck it, this is going to be R-rated.
Yes.
Cleveland, you and I were saying that there is a parallel world not too far removed from this one where this movie was terrible.
And it wouldn't have taken much
And
from
it wouldn't
any direction.
it wouldn't have taken much, and I think the coup de grace would have been making it PG-13.
Yes.
Because it does have, like, the story is kind of meh, and we'll get into that in a minute, but it does have a handful of, I think, pretty effective horror sequences that I don't think they would have been able to get away with PG-13.
There's moments of brutality
Right.
to it.
And like that, especially for like a mid-budget horror movie like this, making it PG-13 so like teenagers can go see it would have been the safe bet.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're like, no, we're going to go R-rated with this and just kind of take the risk, and it still made like hundreds of millions of dollars, speaks very well.
I think that is really is one of the few like benefits of streaming. Mm-hmm. That not few. I mean, there's plenty of benefits of streaming, but it's definitely a strong one in that like R-rated movies don't really stop teens from watching them the same way that they used to.
Right.
Now anyone can just stream it also. So they can probably afford to take that risk better, and I'm sure that this movie was still picked up by a shitload of teens and watched by a shitload of teens, if not more so because it was like, ooh, it's R-rated, you know, like element to it. It's a pretty perfect storm for that, and I'm super here for it.
You know, I think one of the other things in that respect that I really appreciate about this movie is like the horror of it is so simple. Mm-hmm. Someone smiling, you know, creepily while
what if a smile was scary is the brave question that this film dares
the thing
ask.
is that I keep thinking about is like compare this to like Truth or Dare, where it's like creepy CGI smile.
Yeah.
You know, if they did that in this movie, it would have been
like
awful.
Exaggerated smiles.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the plot broadly,
Sure.
what the film is about. So Sosie Bacon plays a therapist who one of her patients comes in, says that she has been seeing something that nobody else can see, that smiles at her scarily, and then she has what appears to be a meltdown and kills herself brutally in front of our protagonist.
Cutting a bloody smile into
Yes.
her.
Now I love this scene.
And we'll break down the scene in a minute, but so the rest of the movie is our protagonist, Rose, finds herself cursed to be followed by this spooky entity that takes on the forms of many different people and smiles at her creepily. And she discovers that, oh, this is a curse that's passed on. Somebody is followed by the spooky entity for a few days. They then kill themselves brutally in front of somebody else. The curse is passed on to the person who witnessed that, so on and so forth. It's basically It Follows.
It feeds on trauma.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But that is the premise. And so she's trying to find a way to break the curse so she doesn't get killed by the scary smile monster. And that's it.
Yeah.
And so that's very simple story. And now we can get into specifics. You wanted to talk about the intro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like this scene for a number of reasons. One, I really like the actress in this scene. She's pretty intense. I think you were even saying like it's a little ham-fisted.
I think she's laying it on a
She's
little thick,
but I feel like
for this kind of movie, that's okay.
Yeah, for this kind of movie, that's expected.
I don't go into this kind of movie looking for great acting.
Right, and again, if you can't be good, be loud. And I think that for an opener for a film, you want to give it that extra punch. You want to have her hit it kind of hard. But I really like her dialogue here too. She feels like someone who earnestly is trying to express the dumb bullshit that's happening. She says, "Look, I know how this is going to sound. I'm a PhD student. I'm not insane. Like, I'm a very reasonable, rational person, and I'm seeing irrational.
And I can't explain this,
shit,
yeah.
and I cannot explain it." And I love that.
And that's a pitfall that our protagonist falls into later, where she's trying to explain what's happening to other people, and she just sounds like a fucking nutcase.
Right, which is weird because she has more tools in her kit being a therapist.
Yeah.
To be able to talk about that stuff, but small potatoes. I like this opening sequence. I also, of course, love it for. Also, I like that actress. I think more. What was the term we were throwing around with Kevin Bacon's daughter?
Nepo baby.
Nepo baby.
Yeah. It's a little mean spirited. Like she's working very hard in this movie. And I
think she's good in this.
Yeah, I don't find her super compelling. And
I don't think that's necessarily the actress's fault, though.
Yeah.
I think it's her character is kind of blandly written. Mm-hmm. She's just kind of horror movie protagonist.
Yeah.
And most of the characters in this movie sort of fall into those horror movie archetypes, you know.
Yeah, and I don't.
There's not any stellar character work in this movie.
No Skarsgårds to be seen. Stellan, it's a bad joke. Anyway, the other factor, of course, is it's certainly not progressive or important, but I'm going to note it anyway. Is I don't really find this actress very attractive because she looks like Kevin Bacon.
She looks like Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, she looks like Kevin Bacon, and that's fine. That is okay. And again, I certainly don't need that in a protagonist to find them relatable, or I don't need a romantic.
You want a hot bitch with big tits, is what you're saying.
I mean, that'd be cool.
you want
Kevin Bacon with big old.
What about Kevin Bacon with a fucking dump truck ass on him?
I mean, I would prefer that. But I don't have too much more to say other than she just really looks like Kevin Bacon, and she would. That's fine.
It's crazy too, because like I went through watching the whole movie the first time, not realizing who she was until I got to the credits. Until I got to the credits, and I was like, "Oh, of course." And then the second time watching, I can't see anything else.
Yeah.
It's like she looks so much like Kevin Bacon, but also at the same time, it's like I've never seen her in anything else before, and I wouldn't think, for some reason, I wouldn't think of Kevin Bacon as having like an actor/actress child, you know?
Yeah.
Right. It reminds me.
But once you hear it, you can't see anything else.
Right, and see, this reminds me of like Liv Tyler, but she doesn't look that much like Steven Tyler. She doesn't look enough like Steven Tyler for that to be like.
No, she doesn't.
Thankfully.
Thank God, she takes after her mother.
Little chauvinism to ring in the new year.
It's interesting looking at comparing Kevin Bacon to her because, like, I feel like there's some parallels between this and like Stir of Echoes.
Oh.
In terms of some of the psychological horror.
Oh, okay.
At play.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about Stir of
one.
Echoes, but you're right. But also, like, I don't know what other stuff she's been in, but this has been a hit, and maybe will sort of kickstart her career in. Well, I was going to say in the same way that Tremors did for Kevin Bacon, but he was already kind of known before Tremors. But
that's before.
Yeah.
Fucking.
Dirty Dancing.
Yeah.
I think Dirty Dancing is pre-Tremors, isn't it?
Yeah, but also
Roadhouse. No, that's Patrick Swayze.
Not Maniac. What's the one with
Flashdance?
No, Footloose.
Footloose.
Yeah.
Footloose.
That's right.
Yeah, kick off your.
Oh wait, yeah. Footloose is Kevin Bacon. Dirty Dancing is Patrick Swayze, and that's where I also went to Roadhouse. Patrick Swayze and Kevin Bacon are kind of similar actors.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hold that against you.
I think Swayze is dead.
I think I like.
That's true.
I think I like Dirty Dancing more than Footloose, but like, who cares?
I've never seen.
Roadhouse is better than all of them.
Roadhouse rules.
Go pick up the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray of Roadhouse. It just came out.
Oh yeah. Anyway, that scene. Another thing I like about that opener is the practicals. It's all done practically. She breaks a
vase with flowers in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and she grabs a shard of it and presses it up against her cheek, and we see the blood flow behind it as it slowly comes down, and she cuts her throat open, and there's lots of nice ooey gooey practical blood pouring down her shirt from
And
the
the whole
wound.
time she's doing a scary smile.
And it's a good smile. It's a good scary smile. I think that actress did a good job with that. It looks spooky. And footnote on that for some of the other ones, but it reminded me of the Jesse Ventura shaving scene in Predator, where like they actually put like a tiny drill to burst the blood, the squib, and I think that it was either like inside of it or just like a tube up her sleeve behind it, like pouring the blood down.
Yeah.
And I love that shit. It's simple. It's not a big deal. Lots of movies do it, but it looked good, and it's a fun way to start the film.
Yeah. Well, and it's a great way to start because compared to something like Conjuring 3, where you just have spinning haunted house insanity, like
Oh yeah,
it's
at the
a
very
much more
beginning
grounded,
too. Yeah.
like in reality, practical effects focused start to the movie, which kind of sets your expectations pretty well. And honestly, I think the smiles in this movie are actually pretty creepy. Like, they do a good job picking actors and actresses that have, like, creepy-looking smiles.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the primary casting decisions for a lot of these people, is they probably just brought them into the audition room and said, give me your creepiest smile. And it's like, okay, that's a good one. Can you act? Well, we'll work around that.
Yeah.
But you do a creepy smile.
I heard one critique about this movie where the smiles don't look the same. I think it was what's that one reviewer with the long hair other than me? Your movie sucks. I think that guy.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
watch
he had a critique where it was like they don't.
Red Letter Media is like the only YouTube movie review show I watch.
Yeah, it's them, and I tune into his stuff every once in a while. I usually don't agree with his opinions, but he's pretty funny. Like, he's got some good jokes, but yeah, like there was a critique where like they don't all have like a similar looking smile.
Wow, because they're different actors who have different faces.
Yeah, I don't want. Yeah, like I didn't really get that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, the
smile.
truth or dare thing. You don't want like a goofy CG Joker smile pasted onto all of these people.
Right, I agree, and I think like they're different people, they're different characters. You know, like possessed by the demon. I
Yeah,
think it works
it's-
fine. Like you also want variety.
Also, it's like
kind
also it's not like there's ever any ambiguity about what a smile in this movie means, right? It's like if a character starts doing a creepy smile, you know that they're the demon or the entity or whatever. It's not like you're like, wait, is that a different one because the smile doesn't look exactly the same as on this other character? That's a fucking stupid critique, man.
Yeah, the only reason I wanted to mention it is just because I did hear that review. It was spoiler free, like until before I went in to see the movie, because I actually didn't think I was even going to watch Smile. It had no effect on my viewing of it or whatever. But for the most part, like, you know, just to be kind, like he did have some like other like good points about the movie, and that I'm mostly on the same page about. Not that that really matters. And generally, I really like his content. I could continue to listen to it.
Well,
It's
if we're on the subject of gripes,
Sure.
we do have another movie to talk about, so I definitely want to get this one off my chest. Is my biggest gripe with this movie is something that you mentioned a few minutes ago, Ben, is that it's about trauma. And this is something that is super common in horror these days, is that every especially high concept like A24 horror movie, the monster can't just be a monster, it has to be a metaphor for the character's trauma or PTSD or something like that. And this movie, though it is much more lowbrow, it tries to do the same high concept thing where the monster is a metaphor, except I guess the director didn't have enough faith in himself to let the viewer figure that out on their own, because there's at one point a character says the line out loud, it feeds on your trauma. There has to be trauma. And that's like, why can't it just be about a monster that smile?
It's so apparent too, like with like the last shot of the movie and everything. Like, it's so obvious.
And it's like, yes, it's like we fucking get it. It's like I think that everything just about in this movie that tries to make the monster metaphorical fails. Not everything, but most of it.
I think the fact that this is a popcorn-ass movie
Yeah.
makes it feel a bit more bearable to
Yes.
me, in that, like, they're not trying to be clever about it. They're being very direct with it, and that's fine. And, you know, on top of that, for me, I think one of the scariest sequences of this film is a flashback to the main character's actual trauma, seeing her mom fucked up on, like, opioids, like,
Yeah.
begging for help, is horrifying.
Yeah.
Like, the look on her face, just kind of, like, eyes glazed over and half open, like, drooling, trying to ask for help.
I agree. That's
terrifying.
That's about the only aspect of it that works, and I think you could still include that stuff that works well without so much of the rest of it. Because this movie is just under 2 hours. For this type of movie, it's long, and it does feel its length at times, and I think that a lot of the stuff that you could cut is the less developed stuff, like with the fiance turning out to be a piece of shit.
A-Train.
A-Train, played by the guy who plays A-Train in The Boys. He's great. And he's fine in this movie and plays a similar character where he's kind of a fucking douchebag. But all of that where, like, oh, once her trauma comes out, her partner can't deal with it because their relationship has never faced strain before, so he becomes a totally different person and
I don't like
abandons
that
her.
that all happens in
and
one
that,
scene.
And
also.
that
It's just too rushed.
and that so then she has to reconnect with her ex-boyfriend who is also a cop. So she goes to him for information, but through the course of the movie, they kind of fall back in love with each other, and she reveals that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Being with you started to break down the walls that I'd built around myself, and that scared me. So that's why I left. And it's like, ugh. Who gives a shit? It's about a scary monster that smile at you. It's about what if a smile was scary. That's all this movie needs to be about. It doesn't need to be about anything else.
To be a little charitable, like, look at Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, those movies explicitly say Freddy, feeds on fear,
Right.
and stuff. Like, that's something that is very direct, and
Right,
that's
but-
common in popcorn.
But that's
horror.
the thing also, is that the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, especially like the original, the first one is almost 40 years old at this point.
Yeah.
It's like,
And so they lean in way harder.
and it's like, it's not, I don't think it's a bad thing for horror movies to be about something, but
or even explicit about it.
or explicit about it. And there are many like high concept horror movies that I love, but I just don't think that every horror film needs to be about that. And I just think that that's the stuff that's most clumsily handled in this movie.
I would agree to an extent. I am thankful that it doesn't feel like they're trying to be too clever for their own good, really. Like, it is kind of dumb guy stuff. Like,
It's dumbed down. It Follows.
Yeah.
It just is.
And
it's just
you know what?
It's
if
about
that exposes more
Yeah.
people to, like, if this is a gateway to actually stuff like It Follows,
sure.
great.
Awesome.
I mean, I don't even think a movie like It Follows is inaccessible, but I agree with you. Like,
I find way more comparisons to the Babadook. I mean, they're both, It Follows, whatever. But like I think that the Babadook is all about trauma, also.
yeah,
and
I mean, so is It Follows, though. It's about specifically sexual trauma, but the monster is an embodiment of sexual trauma that follows you until it catches you. Smile is about an embodiment of just generalized trauma that follows you until it catches you and passes itself on.
Trauma
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
it's a shame because there's another movie I've watched recently where the monster is also trauma, and I really want to talk about it, but I can't because I watched a screener of it, and it's one of ours, and I'm under
okay.
NDA on it. But
Well, I
after
mean,
the movie,
Well, maybe we'll cover it.
Men, the Alex Garland film that
Yeah.
came out early 2022.
maintains allegory though, at least.
Yeah, I think
I have a lot of problems
there's
with Men. I do think it's pretentious, but like at least it does that, and I do. Yeah.
I think it's more bearable in Smile, to be honest.
More bearable.
Just
Yeah,
because-
in that respect, yes.
yeah, but also another movie where the monster is trauma.
It's the What's the most pernicious way I could phrase this? It's the Babadookification of
Babadookification.
horror.
Can we talk about the monster?
Yes.
Which is trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the third act monster reveal, we get an actual monster reveal
Which I
in
was
this movie.
totally not expecting and thought it was awesome.
Big agree.
It's maybe my favorite part of the movie.
Oh, it
it's
is.
it's
Yeah, it's the
amazing.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
Well, yeah, to set that up, we're jumping over a lot of stuff, but
okay.
the
Smile kill people.
Yeah, it's not complicated. The protagonist reasons that the only way that she can be safe is if she isolates herself so there's nobody around for her to kill herself in front of. If there's nobody to pass the curse on to, the monster won't kill her. So where's the most isolated place she can go? Somewhere where she can literally confront her actual trauma. The house where she grew up, where her mother died. The whole time there's this specter of the mother character hanging over the opening shot of the film is the mother dead from an overdose on the bed, and they all throughout the movie they talk about it as a suicide, that the mother, OD'd, she took too many pills, and then once she gets to the house, and we see through the flashback like you mentioned, she didn't intentionally overdose, she accidentally overdosed, asked her 10-year-old daughter to call for help. The daughter did not and let her die. That's the character's trauma. So first she confronts the monster as literally just a hyper-exaggerated, monstrous form of her mother. Just a big tall lady with a huge forehead and big teeth.
Yeah, it's basically an It Follows person.
I mean, it is. It's they even do almost the same shot of like the overly tall monster person coming out of the dark hallway.
Way scarier in It Follows.
Yeah.
But this is fun.
Yeah, it is. It is fun. I do think that like Ben mentioned, like the flashback with the mother dying and asking for help like is pretty scary, and then like her getting up and like turning into the monster and having that whole confrontation is cool.
To me, the monster kind of looked like the monster from Mortuary Assistant a little bit.
Which one? The pale one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just looked like
I love him. He's
looked
a
like
little boy.
Mama from Mama.
Kinda, yeah.
Just a big bitch with a huge forehead.
Yeah, and arms that are a little too long.
Yeah.
I really like the design of that.
I do too. I think it's fun in this movie, and especially like with the big exaggerated mouth too. Like for a smiling monster is cool. But then they do a kind of obvious fake out where she defeats the monster and is like, because she's like, oh, she does a Freddy thing. It's
it
like
feels very Nightmare on Elm Street.
yeah, it's like if because the monster says like, your mind makes it real. You're real because
Which I didn't like.
Because you perceive me as real. And so she has this moment where she's like, well, if it's my mind that makes it real, then you're stuck in here with me too. Also very similar to Malignant.
I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me.
Yeah, you're trapped in here with me.
Pretty classic.
Smashes this very convenient old-timey gas lantern that she has for some reason. It sets it on fire, sets the house on fire. She's confronted her trauma. She's no longer afraid of it. She has burned it down, and she goes back to the ex-boyfriend to be like, I actually love you or whatever. Can I just like sleep on your couch to overcome this big ordeal that I just went through, and like, can you just stay with me while I sleep? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll stay with you. I'll always stay with you. And then he does a scary smile, and oh my god, she's back at the house.
I really do like that transition where she runs out, because she's in the normal house, she's in her old home, and then she runs outside, and she's running out of the old house, and she turns around and she sees it. I think that's nice. That's a great,
it's fun.
And she runs out, and then the ex-boyfriend actually pulls up because he's figured out where she's gone, and because he's trying to be a chivalrous hero and not leave her to face this alone. He's like, oh, even though she tells him to stay away, he shows up. And of course, now that there's someone there to witness her death, that seals her fate. She runs back in the house, locks the door, the monster appears again, and we get the true monster reveal, which is fucking fantastic.
Awesome. Amazing.
It literally peels off its face, and it's just like a big, goofy smile within a smile within a smile.
It's like a multi-jawed monster.
It's a ghoul. It's ripped all its skin off, so it's skinless. And
but it's like it's like 10 feet tall. It's like huge,
and
it's just got this huge gaping maw.
It's just like sets and sets of lower jaws over lower jaws
that are all smiling.
Yeah, and it's great.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome, and it just like opens her mouth real wide and climbs on inside, which reminded me of Daniel Isn't Real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
she talked about a couple of years ago. That's a trope that I'll always love in horror movies, is when a monster climbs inside someone's mouth.
It's always great,
just pulls it open real wide and climbs in there. And yeah, then the boyfriend breaks in, and now she's there, and she's smiling, and she's dumping gasoline on herself, and sets herself on fire in front of him, and you can see her burning silhouette reflected in his eyes as it kind of zooms in on his face, and the curse is passed on.
I love how bleak the ending is.
Yeah.
Like for a popcorn horror movie, you almost expect a happy-ish ending.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of frustrating about the fake out until you realize that it is a fake out, because they do start to give you
hope.
A happy ending. It's like, oh, she did it, and now she's, she lost her other boyfriend, but now she's regaining a boyfriend, and everything is gonna be sunshine and roses again. She's come to terms with her trauma about her mother, but nope.
And I like that too, because in that moment, the first time I was watching the movie, I was kind of bummed out. Also, because the one thing I'd heard about this movie is the monster is great. And I was like, oh, word, cool. The monster at the end is going to be cool. Awesome. I saw the big tall person, I'm like, okay, they didn't It Follows, but it's scarier than that. I don't really understand. I don't think it's that bad. That's scary. And on top of that, when she lights on fire with the lantern, when it's on fire, it does a reverse shot where we never see her and it in the room at the same time.
Right.
And it's
because
really
the burning
editing.
monster is CG, and they didn't want to waste their money on trying to composite.
So
her
it just
in
does
there.
a 180 where like you see the burning monster, and then you see her by the door, and then back to the burning monster, and we never get like her in the shot with it and it reaching out to her, which is a missed opportunity, because like that's usually a really good way to like you put your character in the shot and like you're in fear for them with the monster, and there's a sense of proportion. But like we don't get that, and it's really cheap. And then she runs off, and it's like, oh man, now they're gonna do a happy ending. I was really bummed out. So I was quite pleased when it came back around, and we got our 6th smile monster.
The subversion is nice.
I would love to see more of it, but I think with the movie's budget, they were maxed.
Yeah,
I think for what they had, and so I think it's still a good use of budget, and it's all fine.
We forgot to mention how weird it was that the house just had a gas lantern.
Yeah, that was weird. I mean, it's just like one of those things like, oh, it's an old house, but it's like, yeah,
so
but
she never sold the house?
But she lived there. She lived there with
that
her...
was a plot point, because she didn't want to sell it, and her sister did.
Yeah, that's right.
About that at the dinner.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's supposed to be like, oh, look, she found it in the old house, but it's like, the old house, she lived there with her mom like 20 years ago. It's like, but they have one of these like old gas lanterns, and it's like, it's just because it's more evocative than a flashlight. It's creepier, and also so she can smash it on the monster and set it on fire.
I really love the bleak ending with all of this, because I feel like thematically it works really well. Even though they hit us over the head with trauma, it's like it would feel like a cop-out to give a happy ending to a story about trauma.
Yeah.
Because you can't just be like, oh, I defeated my trauma. It's not there anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can't just do the exact same thing the Babadook did.
I do think the messaging is kind of mixed though for a movie that's like claiming to be about confronting your trauma. Like, what does the end really say? It's like you can try to confront your trauma, but in the end it's just going to climb inside your mouth and live there forever. You know, like I think that's another sort of like writing problem is like if your film's going to be if your monster's going to be a metaphor for something, like say something. It doesn't really, whatever. Like you said, it's a popcorn movie. Are y'all ready to rate Smile?
One quick note that flows into ratings nicely is this movie does feature a fantastic cat named Mustache.
Oh, yeah.
That's my joke at the beginning.
Finds it.
Yeah.
An unfortunate demise.
Yeah, the cat goes missing, and to kind of show the final straw in her descent into madness, she goes to her nephew's birthday party and gives him a train set gift. He opens it up, and the dead cat is inside. He displays it in CG fashion, this dead cat.
It's very obviously a CG dead cat.
And we talked about it, and my first thought was, like how a lot of movies do these days, is they have a puppet, and they also have, they usually shoot it twice. They have it with a puppet, and then with nothing, so they can maybe CG it in if the puppet doesn't work. But I think in this case, they just did CG because
I think it's because they didn't want to freak. There's a lot of children on set. Because we noticed, too, in the rest of the scene, while she's having, like, her breakdown and she's, like, screaming, like, about the dead cat, and I didn't put the dead cat in the box, and so on and so forth. It's cut in such a way that none of the children are in any of the shots where she's actually, like, screaming and crying. So I think they just had, like a green puppet or something that they CG'd a dead cat onto. Looks kind of goofy.
Yeah, but they cut away from it really quickly to try and hide it. So,
I didn't notice it until this second watch.
Yeah,
so.
And like when you catch it, it does look pretty bad. But they're cutting from it so fast, it's fine.
It's never the focal point of the shot, so it's fine.
Yeah, and I will say, generally, when it comes to horror films, I tend to like in thrillers where like those with sin die, those without sin don't. It's fun. You know, it can be a little outdated and, in a lot of cases chauvinistic because it's like, oh, they had sex so they need to die or whatever. But I'm still a fan of that, which is why I generally hate it in horror movies. And this is not not the most common of takes, but like I generally hate it in horror movies when they kill the animal because animals are free of sin.
Right,
like,
they're innocent, yeah.
Yeah, like let the dogs and cats live. Big proponent of that. I don't care how bleak your horror movie is.
And I generally agree with you, and I think a lot of films sort of cynically kill the animals for no real reason other than that something needs to die or the dog needs to die because otherwise it would be barking and trying to bite the slasher or whatever. But in this movie, I forgive it more because though it is sad the beautiful little kitty cat dies, at least in the film it has a meaningful payoff with the reveal of opening the gift and there's a dead cat instead of a model train.
That scene is fucking hilarious.
When there's like a good narrative reason for it,
and it's well executed.
It bothers me less. Also because it's not gratuitous about it.
It's well done. It is. And I did enjoy it. And again, they did a good job when the cat is there. It's named Mustache, which is a great name for a cat, and it's a good looking cat. Like
it's not like in The Collector where the cat gets thrown on like the sticky acid and like burns its part of its skin off, and then it jumps up on the window, which closes down and cuts it in half. Like that's just.
Yeah, like those movies are supposed to be gratuitous, and I get it, but I hate that. I hate that shit too. -2 off of that movie for it. But this one, okay. Just by principle, I usually take off a star. I'm only going to take off half a star.
Okay.
For it.
Well, what is the rating? What's
3. Would have been a 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ben, what about you?
I really enjoyed this movie. I think this is like the perfect middle ground between high concept and popcorn horror. I think it's an example of an okay script executed excellently. I'm really excited to see what Parker Finn does next. This is a 4 out of 5 for me. I want to pose that question after we rate.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I'm gonna split the difference for a 3 out of 5. I like a lot of things about this movie. I think it has some writing problems and it's a little bit too long, but I'm really happy it did well. And what it will be, I think, is one of those movies that I go back and watch every now and then when I want a horror movie that I don't have to think too hard about and can spend most of my time scrolling on my phone and look up for a few like really great sequences that I like. I think this is like the perfect kind of movie for that. Yeah. I'm very happy it did well, and I'm on board for Smile too. So 3.5 out of 5, which will make 3.5 the average for Smile.
Well, this poses a question. This movie was very successful at the box office, as we were saying earlier, like 200 million or something like that. Parker Finn said he's not opposed to a sequel, but he wants to make sure that they do something different with it, so it's not just retreading the same territory. What do you think they should do for Smile 2?
Frown.
Whoa.
Turn that smile upside down.
Pretty crazy.
And it revealed that there's more than one trauma monster out there, but instead of this one smiling at people, this one frowns at people, and it's represents a different kind of trauma somehow.
I got a couple thoughts. I think this movie did really well, so they would give the next one a much bigger budget. So you can go pretty big with it, right? You can do some set pieces. You can go kind of crazy. The first thing I would want out of it, which isn't that big, but I want it to in some way revolve around some sort of fast food chain where the mascot is smiling, for cuteness. I think that's fun. And then some sort of big, like, mass-produced trauma thing where, like, they can infect an entire city with Smile.
Oh, somebody kills themselves on television.
Yeah, on live TV.
On TV, and simultaneously...
The trauma monster tries to spread as much as
Oh,
possible.
yeah, and it becomes like a plague. A plague of smiles.
That.
And then,
now,
like,
that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and then they have to call in the National Guard, and, it's awesome. Yeah, that's
and then
what I want.
and then it ends with the Smile apocalypse, and then Smile 3 is post Smile apocalypse.
I can see the poster already. It's like the globe, but it has the smiley face on it.
Drawn on it.
Yeah.
In blood.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah. Love it.
It's like the cover art for Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen. Where it's like the world, but like the top part of the crust is taken off and there's a skull beneath it. But instead, it's the bottom part and it's a smile skull.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Love it.
All right. Well, moving on. We've got a whole other movie to talk about, so let's waste no time. So the second film that we're going to be talking about is Incantation, which is a Taiwanese horror film directed by Kevin Cho that came out on Netflix. Kind of out of nowhere in summer 2022, in June, I believe. And for a little while, it was just blowing everybody's nips clean off. And I was one of those people for the most part, hence why I chose it. I really liked this movie a lot. It was in my top 10 of the year, but I didn't mention it on our Best of the Year podcast because I knew we were going to talk about it now.
It was the highest grossing Taiwanese horror movie of all time.
Yep. It's also interesting that it is one of two really good Taiwanese horror films that came out in 2022, the other being The Sadness.
Yeah. They're having a sort of renaissance,
yeah,
you could say.
So, Cleveland, you have used a particular phrase to describe this film a couple of times, which I think is correct, but a little bit unfair. You describe it as Noroi the worse.
Yeah.
Which I do...
And I agree that is correct and
Which
unfair.
I do... It's correct and unfair. It's correct in the sense that it is not as good as Noroi. It's unfair in the sense that Noroi is a perfect film and a near impossible bar to meet by any film.
Yeah.
And though Incantation does share a lot of the same DNA, both being Asian found footage horror films about being cursed by a spooky deity, I think that Incantation is really good. It takes a very different approach from Noroi, but does have a lot in common. Definitely shares similar DNA.
Yeah, so I don't come off like right out the gate as a villain. This movie is fantastic, and I love it. There are so many great moments in it. I think I've seen it 3 times now, which is as many times as I've seen Noroi. And I've also seen one of the films that predecessed Noroi. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, but the same director as Noroi. I've seen some of his earlier films, and you can see the lineage there, which kind of also shows some of the strings on the curse a little bit. But yeah, like Noroi is a perfect film. It's a low budget film, and I think it's a perfect found. In other words, it's a perfect found.
It's a perfect found footage film.
It's my favorite found footage film at this point. Like I don't think I can really consider any found footage movie better than it. I think it's one of the best uses of the genre, and yeah, it's perfect for what it should be.
Yeah.
Incantation has a massive budget by comparison.
Yes.
And has a lot more spectacle going for it. And almost all of that spectacle lands in a big way for me. Like, it's great. I had an amazing time with it. I don't think it's as clean.
No.
And I don't think and the biggest issue is that Noroi, found footage or not, has some of the best and most compelling characters I've seen in a horror film, too.
Yes.
Like, I adore every character in Noroi. In particular, our wonderful, like, crazed, aluminum-garbed, hero guy. He's great.
Yeah.
And he's perfectly acted.
Tragic prophet character.
Yeah, our tragic
kind of.
Yeah, our tragic prophet. Like he's amazing. And everyone else is. Like all our characters, even
Noroi does have a good strong cast.
Yeah, like even our quiet documentarian has like a good personality to him. And everyone in Incantation is fine. But by comparison, I mean, like, no one sticks as much. No one is as wonderful. Like, there's your pretty stereotypical haunted child, concerned mother figure, concerned father figure. And I do really like their family dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting dynamic of Incantation that sort of breaks the cliche a little bit is that our protagonist, Ronan is her name. She is reuniting with her young daughter of 6 years old after giving her up at birth, and we're kind of learning about the events that led to her giving up the child, and now why 6 years later she's decided to try to bring her back into her life and raise her, on her own. And in that sense, it's also like Smile, kind of it's about trauma, it's about family, it's about trauma.
The story is told very non-linearly.
And it's got a cool mouth monster.
And it's got a cool mouth monster. More on that later.
The story is told very non-linearly. There's a lot of flashbacks. It jumps around in time quite a bit. I just want to say early on, I really enjoyed this movie. I saw it 2 times in this last week, in addition to the one time I've seen it before. I think it's great. I will say on rewatches, I think one of its flaws a little bit is pacing.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Long-winded. It bounces around.
It's also similarly to Smile. It's long. It's just
long,
under 2 hours.
And I think some of the non-linear stuff, some of it hits more than others. Sometimes it feels like it just draws things out a little too much.
Yeah. It has a couple of, like, tonally inconsistent things. Although especially after rewatch, I've actually been able to sort of explain away some of the problems that I had on the initial watch.
Same.
It doesn't necessarily forgive them from a storytelling perspective, but I did find myself able to personally forgive them a little bit more. A big issue, especially while we're still on the Noroi comparison, that I had with it on first watch is what Noroi and a lot of Koji Shiraishi's stuff does is the authenticity. Noroi really feels like a good found footage film because it feels deeply authentic. The way it's presented and everything. And especially considering that it kind of found its way to the US on YouTube before Shudder picked it up, all of this stuff. In that way, it's sort of like the Blair Witch Project, and that's what makes really good found footage horror, is that sense that, like, you're watching something that you shouldn't necessarily be seeing, that you've just kind of stumbled upon. And with Incantation, especially on first watch, I was kind of turned off by, like, how manufactured it is. Like, it does not have that same level of authenticity. But the more I think about it, and especially on rewatch, I kind of like that now, because what I really had to realize is that this character who is presenting this film to us she's a fucking YouTuber. And really, the film is constructed in a lot of ways like an extended YouTube video essay.
Yeah.
With a lot of the same pacing problems that are sort of inherent in those things.
Edited in music and kind of, like, emotionally manipulative, like, string pulling. And that's what when I was watching the first time, like, oh, this is kind of annoying. It doesn't have that same raw feeling that something like Noroi does. But then it's like, well, of course not, because the person, our protagonist who's presenting this to us, is a fucking YouTuber. She's made an intentionally, especially by the end, an intentionally manipulative story to share with the world because she's trying to achieve a specific goal.
I think one of its strengths is the way that's framed at the very beginning, with kind of going
I love the
through
beginning of this movie.
The ideas of manipulating your perception.
And how thought shapes the world around you, which does end up becoming sort of a big theme. I love the opening of this movie because it starts with two of these same kind of, like, optical illusions. The first one is like a drawing of a Ferris wheel, and it's like moving frame by frame, and so you can either make it rotate clockwise or counterclockwise with your mind just by, like, changing the perception.
Magic.
Same thing with, like, the video of the train going into the tunnel. You can do the same thing. It's shot in such a way where you can make it seem like it's coming out of the tunnel instead, while this voiceover is kind of talking about the way that thought influences and can make things real in the world. But then it slaps you right after that with these, like, very spooky shots of something that you have no context for yet, like this little girl's body that's, like, covered in, like, sores and, like, holes and stuff, and the shot of the inside of the mouth with, like, all of the extra teeth and stuff. It's like just going from one to the other is, like, such a strong cold.
That shot alone, done practically, looks incredible.
Yeah, the inside of the mouth with all of the extra fucking teeth.
Like, it's one of those, like, medical cams too. Like, it gets really tight in there, like, inside the mouth, and you're trying to figure out, like, what's even going on, because I think it starts from the back, like, back of the throat to the front, and like all of the teeth, it's all wet, it's all inside of a mouth that looks real and like earnestly real, and that's fucking impressive. Yeah, really, really spooky.
And then we get a little bit of the talking head of Ronan, talking to us as the audience, being like, I'm doing this to save my daughter, and I need your help. Look at this symbol, memorize this symbol, and, like, while you're holding it in your mind, recite this incantation that we hear and see many times throughout the movie.
So just a heads up, if you're trypophobic, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
You're going to have a really bad time with this movie. Because, like, all of the sores that are on the girl and stuff, they all have, like, those, like, repeated holes in them that are just so nasty and spooky. And I fucking love it. It's really good makeup. Like, it's super well done.
Yeah, they really play up the tiny holes.
That's another thing that, like... what I really appreciate on follow-up viewing that I think is kind of a problem on first viewing too, and I think contributes to some of the pacing stuff, is this movie is very dense, especially the lore. There's so much, and a lot of it is done very subtly, and it's not...
And it is interesting for the most part.
No, it's all interesting, and I think one of the great things about this movie is that attention to detail, and why I appreciated it even more on rewatch is because I was able to pick up on more of that detail. I think that it can... on a first viewing, like it's throwing a lot at you.
Yeah.
And that is a problem with pacing. I do agree. But I think it's a film that holds up very well on rewatch.
Great.
Yeah. I do think at times it gets a little lost in the sauce with that stuff.
Oh, sure.
It does a good job breaking some of that up with spooky sequences.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I think in that respect, some of the non-linearity helps a little bit because they kind of sense when they're losing steam a little bit, and then they jump to something.
It's like,
spooky.
now we need to go see something spooky. And also what it does is it saves us from having to watch the flashback video all at once, which would be like just like inserting a 30-minute flashback somewhere in the movie, which I think would hurt the pacing more than it does. But yeah, the movie jumps back and forth. Present time with Ronan readopting her daughter Dodo, and them, trying to have a life together, but very quickly realizing that something is wrong. There's something spooky, and Ronan seems to recognize aspects of it and is trying to keep herself from freaking out. And then that is intercut with the flashback to 6 years prior, when she and her friends or colleagues or whatever, who have this Ghostbusters style YouTube channel where they go to spooky places and look for ghosts and stuff, they go to this isolated mountain village, like way out in the middle of nowhere, where this like very old clan that one of them belongs to, or his family belongs to, is doing some sort of obscure annual ritual, and that they're there because they know that this clan the Chen clan has there's a tunnel that you do not enter. And they're going up there so they can enter that spooky tunnel.
The Forbidden Hole.
And
the Forbidden Hole, yeah.
This whole village looks amazing. Like these sets are fucking bangers. I think we were joking about like, oh man, like this is a fucking Far Cry game, like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like each building is sort of made from like found objects, some of the roofs are scrap, some of them aren't, but like they're usually multiple stories tall, and they're still done with like, traditional Asian architecture, and it looks fucking cool. And there's a lot of like winding side paths through the village. It's
a mountain village. It's a village built on a mountain.
And it looks really good, and it gets shown off a lot. So I just
it's a
appreciate
cool
that even
set.
the village has a good personality.
And I will say, to the movie's benefit, I think we were talking about authenticity earlier. The village has kind of an air of authenticity to it. That and like the religious practices they bring, even though in reality they're fictionalized, like it feels like a real like belief system that
it does.
they have.
Well, I mean, all that lore is thought out, and that's we get so much of that, and there is a lot of attention to detail about their belief system and the deity that they worship and all of this stuff. That's just like it's very developed. It's very well thought out. And the practices and rituals and stuff that they do around it is cool. And what I like about it too is that like one of the pretenses that they set up very early on is the more you know about the deity, the more prone you are to like misfortune. So the more you learn, the more you experience, the more cursed you become, which I think is cool, because then as the viewer, it's like throughout the film, we're learning more. And it's like you are it makes you, what the movie does really well, and we'll especially talk about at the end, is the movie really makes you feel like an active participant,
Yep.
which I think is its number one greatest strength. And I think is also important for found footage, even though some of the, like, kind of Blair Witch, Noroi authenticity is lost, it gains a degree of authenticity in that you are not a passive viewer, you're an active participant in what is happening.
It's kind of perfect. Well, there's another film we should mention that's very relevant, and that's The Ring.
Sure.
Yeah, because The Ring also involves a cursed movie. But here, the movie that you're watching is the cursed movie.
Right.
And that's perfect. Like, but it's doing the same, and especially by the end, like, that's made very clear.
Yeah.
To us that, like, oh, yeah, sorry, this whole thing was designed
Spoilers,
to be...
yeah.
Spoilers for Incantation, which you should go fucking watch. By the end, it's revealed to us that, hey, guess what? This entire thing you've been watching, I've slowly been cursing you, and now you have it too. Go spread it. Like, and the more that we spread the curse, maybe the more that we can dilute it, and we can solve all this bullshit. Maybe, or we're all just gonna, like, all of our teeth are gonna fall out. Who knows?
Yeah.
And it's slower and it's cooler, and the way it's gradually introduced is neat, and much more than just like looking at a spooky well. You really do feel like it's seeping in.
Yeah.
That fucking rules. Like, that's great. So yeah, big props to this movie for that. And you know what? Again, for as grand as it all is, as found footage goes, that's a fucking gem of a concept for a found footage
Totally.
movie. Like that, oh, the movie, that's the whole point of found footage, right? Like, we talked about it on even Trash Humpers, right? Like, it feels like you just kind of, like, found this VHS tape at a like a used goods store, and you put it on, and it's like, oh fuck, there's like real murders on this
It's
tape.
like,
and
yeah,
shit.
what, I'm not supposed to be watching this.
It's forbidden. It's cursed footage, and this is the ultimate curse, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like the actual spiritual fuckery that's going on as you slowly watch this movie, and it's all done as an incantation.
Right. Well, and
cool.
And it justifies some of the things in the movie that I find a little bit more grating too. Like, especially like sort of leading up to the climax at the end, there's this whole part where there's just like this very like melancholy, like emotional piano music, and you're like, it's like flashing back to things that we've already seen in the movie, and like why Ronan is actually like a good mother, and she's doing everything for her child, and it's like so sickly sweet, and I find it kind of obnoxious, but also like the point is the meta narrative aspect of it is it's intentionally manipulative. It's supposed to, tug at your heartstrings because this character, this person, is asking you to participate in this ritual to help her save her daughter. So she's trying to make you really love them, to make you feel good about it. And she gives you multiple outs. She's like, if you don't want to do this, stop watching now, because we're about to get into the thing. But it's like, oh no, I want to help her save her daughter, so I got to keep going. Like it's an interesting thing, because like watching it is kind of annoying, but it does feel like it is intentionally done.
It's motivated.
It's motivated. Yeah, it's kind of a strange beast.
And I gotta be real too. I'm gonna talk about my favorite shot in the movie, of which there are many, but the way that she imbues us with it is super fucking cool.
Oh yeah.
Like, so throughout the film, we keep seeing this symbol that appears, and it's relatively complex too. Like, it's series of lines and then like circles. Some are dotted in, some aren't.
It's some occult. Like it's an occult ass
It's a
looking
really,
symbol.
It's a good looking symbol for that too. It feels like an occult symbol. But it seems kind of tricky. She's like, you got to start memorizing this throughout the movie. And she's like, okay, it comes down the middle, and it's like a triangle, and then like there's the dots on either side, and there's the dash at the bottom. Like, okay, I'm starting to memorize this thing, and it keeps popping up. Usually, like during like chapter sequences, as well. And she's showing us other little tricks and fun things. Like you said, it starts with like the Ferris wheel. It starts with the train. You move forwards or back. Like we're engaging with the movie in a fun kind of puzzle way, which I love. And then at the end of the film where she asks you, all right, here we go. We're going to do this. Let's start saying the chant that we've been hearing throughout the movie.
Right.
And you start like doing the chant with it, and
I'll put a soundbite in here.
And then we get this wonderful image on screen, and the transition is cool because it's on her laptop. And
yeah, she's gone back to the
on.
tunnel, yeah.
And it was really clever, like, on the film production side. Like, and she's in the tunnel, and she puts her camera up to it, and there's kind of the light on it. So it's sort of, there's some, like, light diffraction or whatever with her laptop screen, and then she clicks off the light as she centers it, and that allows them to put up a perfect JPEG of it.
Yeah.
Like, and it's neat because it could still be the laptop screen, but it allows for... them to kind of break that fourth wall in a nice way. And it's the symbol, and then there's a circle of negative space around it, and then the rest of the frame is just filled with runes. Mm-hmm. And as the chanting starts that you're supposed to chant along with, little symbols appear in the center that keep you focused in on it, and they're saying things like life, death, God, beauty, agony, despair, etc.
Yeah.
And so you're really centered in on the screen, and it's just black.
Well, what it is,
with white symbols.
It's a classic hypnosis trick.
Yes,
and that like the runes on the background, it's black on white, but then in the center, the characters that flash up that you see with the translations, it's in red. Mm-hmm. So you know that like the optical illusion things you see online where it's like the white and black spiral, there's a point of red that you focus on in the middle to keep your focus, and then it makes the image like shift around it. And so this is doing that. It is actively hypnotizing you in this sequence.
And because it's also an optical illusion, it feels magical.
Well, and the cool thing about it too is that it kind of works.
Yeah.
Like, it goes on for long enough that, like, I feel myself entering a trance, like, during that, because it's not just quick. Like, it goes on for a couple of minutes of just this background and these red characters flashing up while there's this chanting over it, and your brain does start to kind of, like, fall into a trance-like state.
Kind of start to feel like they're spinning around the central one.
Yeah.
And then it carries on, and you're trying to devote this symbol to your memory. And then it cuts to, and then like as it builds and it builds and it builds, a chime is struck, and we cut to perfect white. And the negative image fills with our eyes.
Is still
burned into your
is imprinted on the screen. 10 out of 10. That's so fucking cool.
What's fucking cool too is that the last thing it does before the chime where it goes to white is, and after it's kind of taken a minute to like hypnotize you, is it asks you to offer your name, to think your own name. And that is part of the ritual of like the offering to this evil deity, this Mother Buddha, is to give her your name. So this whole thing is like lulling your brain into this, very susceptible state. And then at the very end, it's like, I forget exactly what it says, but it's like think name, something like that. And then it does the chime and it goes to white and it's like superimposed. It's so fucking cool.
It's the coolest shit ever.
It's so cool. I haven't seen a movie that does something like that.
It's probably like my favorite moment in movies this year.
One of them, for sure.
Like, it's so cool. It's so compelling. To watch like working in horror and like doing this podcast and like studying film, I think we can all relate to how we've made a study out of seeing the strings in movies.
Yeah, sure.
Like we've made a study of knowing like, oh cool, that's practically done. Like just in Smile, we were talking about like how we were kind of guessing over how an effect was done. Mm-hmm. Like that's my job, like literally. So when I encounter something in a film like this that just makes me feel like an active participant and that a spell is actually being cast on me, like, fucking
And honestly,
awesome. 10 out of 10.
being able to see the strings makes it even more effective for me to be able to recognize what it's doing to you and that it still accomplishes
Still
it,
does
is really cool.
Yeah, like, yeah. So I have mad props for that sequence, and again, the thing that's, I think, so genius about it is the simplicity. We're just looking at symbols and listening to a chant, and what they do with that is genius, and to, like, set it up throughout the film is extremely cool. And yeah, so this movie is fan-fucking-tastic. Is there anything earlier on in the film we want to talk about before we get to the end?
I mean, there's a number of, like, good scare sequences, and like we said, there's a lot of lore around this Mother Buddha deity, and there's a lot of cool stuff, like the feeding frogs hair shit. And when she goes into the room and there's the painting on the ceiling, but the face of the Mother Buddha is like rotted out and bleeding
With the holes in it.
with the holes in it, and how that sort of sets up the end of the movie.
I love all of that. I love the stuff with the like the silkworms and caterpillars, and the and of course, like, all the holes everywhere. You got to dig those holes. It's super scary. But there is one thing I don't like, one gripe about, like, the special effects stuff. I think they could have gotten rid of, frankly. Like, they could have condensed a little bit, and that's the teleporting. They do it a couple of times, and I think it's too fantastic. Like, people's teeth falling out and growing back in, there's a biological element to it, like, that really works for me. But just on a personal level, I just felt like it was kind of trite when the lights flicker and the person's there and then they're not there. It was a little bit too spectral, and I feel almost took away from
That's cliche ghost movie shit. I do think the sequence where they're, like, trying to drive to the place and they keep basically, like, looping around and, like, seeing the same thing is pretty cool. I like that.
I have to say, a lot of the best sequences of horror, in my opinion, happen in the flashbacks.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like
the
the current I feel like the current day horror stuff is a bit more trite, spooky ghost in the house, it feels like kind of well done territory where
it's well executed.
The flashbacks, especially with the forbidden hole,
the
and
stuff in the tunnel,
village, like, that stuff is so good that it kind of, because it's so good, it kind of emphasizes to an extent, like, how everything else is, like, not quite up to par.
Yeah, I think it's all well executed, but it is kind of it's kind of cliche.
I think that's one of the biggest things that causes some of the pacing.
It's
issues,
generic, yeah. That being said, like, I like the scene at the beginning where, like, the little girl is, like, saying that there's, like, a baddie on the ceiling in her room or whatever, and they do the whole thing where it's like the mom is trying to be like, okay, go away, baddie. She's like, well, no, you have to lead it out by the hand. So she has to, like, stand up on a chair, and she's just, like, moving her hand around, like, empty space and being like, am I holding its hand now? Am I holding? No, you got to go a little higher, a little to the left.
That's just pretty spooky.
That scene, I think, is pretty spooky. And then she's, like, trying to take it out through the house, and then, like, when she gets to the front door, you just kind of see, like, a shadow pass, like, back into the room, like, the way they came. I thought that stuff is, while not particularly original, it's spooky. Honestly, one of the spookiest moments for me that I wish there was a little bit more of is the video from, like, the preschool when the little girl, like, goes down the hallway and she's standing at, like, the top of the stairs, and there's just, like, these two long, like, spectral arms that are coming up from the stairs and, like, reaching towards her face. That's, like, the only kind of shit, like, I thought that was spooky, but that's, like, the only time something like that happens in the movie.
Well, in the tunnel, we get all the arms in that one shot.
Yeah.
And that shot is great.
Yeah. I mean, then that's just like, goddamn, how many horror movies is there a tunnel or a hallway where hands come out of the wall and ceiling and try to,
man.
Yeah, but dude, They're really well done. I personally,
Yeah.
I'll never get tired of like it's way better than like a teleporting ghost
It's
or whatever.
spooky- it's
but like,
spooky.
all the arms coming out of the wall, like I'm a big fan.
I think the whole tunnel is cool. And I mean,
hasn't been
tunnels
done a lot, but-
tunnels themselves are spooky. Tunnels themselves are kind of a cliche of found footage horror in itself. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff in the tunnel. All of like the mirrors and like the weird different shrines that are just kind of set up, just
the
like.
weird runes and artifacts. And
Yeah, and then the Mother Buddha statue at the very end, which is a fucking very, very cool prop. Because it's got, like, all of the arms, but, like, the hands are separate. Like, all the hands are, like, hanging, suspended, because there's no, like, actual arms on the statues. And then, of course, the big reveal at the end, you know, when she goes back after the whole hypnotizing thing is
my other favorite shot of the movie.
Mother Buddha's face is the center of the curse, so that's why the statue has the face covered. You don't look at the face of Mother Buddha, but then that's the last shot of the movie. Pretty well, close enough.
Well, it's followed by like what becomes a motif in the movie is characters smashing their own face.
Yes.
Which I think is pretty creepy, honestly.
It is. It's also been done in a lot of horror movies,
But it's done
especially
so well
especially
here, yeah.
the webcam shot
Oh
of
yeah,
somebody
I mean,
smashing
I think
their
of
face on the keyboard.
Unfriended, yeah, where they do that and they're like
Unfriended.
typing
Host.
weird stuff.
Host, they do the same thing in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake
Like,
with one of the characters.
It's common enough, like having watched like too many found footage movies, like you can put it on a bingo sheet. Like it's pretty common.
Yeah,
for people to
character
smash their head.
character smashes their face on a keyboard or something. Yeah,
Well, because like you can do it on a budget, you know, like because you can do a transition every time the head hits because there's a shake, so you can have them like come back up with more blood on their
Yep.
nose and stuff, and it's fun and.
provides easy places to cut.
Yeah, and it's usually fine. Like like it's a cliche, but it's well enough executed. But you know, here it also there is some reasoning for that because they're trying to put a hole in their head, right?
Yeah.
And because that's what's so cool about this reveal, right? Like, oh, what could be behind the veil that's covering Mother Buddha's face? What could be so scary that we could see after? And again, too, like working in horror. You see scary faces all the time. It doesn't really,
Right.
it kind of wears off. But, here, this one got the shit out of me because the answer is some really scary nothing.
It's a
the
void,
veil is
yeah.
removed, and it's a void, but it's a metal statue, but where the ring is around the face, it's flesh. It's a flesh hole going back that's covered in tinier pulsating holes. And it
It's
looks
a
so
hole
good.
full of holes. Well, and also that like it's another tunnel.
And it's
that
endless.
It's an endless hole that goes way off into black.
Because
Yeah.
she is negative space. She is the emptiness of the void.
Right.
So the prayer, the incantation is into nothingness. It's the reverse of giving, of love. It's spreading. It's terrible, and it's nihilism, and it's
Yeah.
nothing, and it's awesome and super fucking scary.
Well, that's another one of the cool lore details is the hand thing that like the typical gesture in tantric Buddhism. There's a specific word for it. I can't remember what it is, but it's like you touch your thumb to your forefinger and you do that on both hands and then put the points together, and that's supposed to be you're collecting blessings. You're drawing in blessings. But these people, this deity, you still put the thumb and forefinger together, but then you touch the back of your hands together. So it's, instead of bringing in blessings, it's spreading the curse.
Throwing up gang signs.
Throwing up gang signs, yeah. Mother Buddha's a blood.
the Buddha ain't nothing to fuck with.
Yeah.
She's just crip walking around.
But yeah, no, earnestly scary, earnestly cool. That's great.
It is
world
cool.
building.
Yeah,
it is great.
It's
And
good
it
world
reminds me
building, yeah.
of Noroi the Curse and the cutting of the rope and the clapping. Like no other clan claps this many times. Like you
Right.
clap 4 times and bow like this many times, and I love that shit. It's super cool and fun, and I respect it. And it's something you can engage with. When they do it, you can do it as well.
Yeah.
Like at the screen, and it's fun. It's interactive.
And the incantation itself is short and repetitive enough that whether you want it to or not, it does get stuck in your head, and you do find yourself reciting it in your head, you know, at the same time as she's asking you to. You can't force yourself to stop doing that. Yeah, well, I mean, we've glossed over a lot of like specifics in Incantation, but it's worth your time.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you've stuck through and hadn't seen it and you've had the ending spoiled, at least you can enjoy the myriad of spooks that are to be had that we haven't talked about in detail.
We're here to talk about the movies. We're not here to be comprehensive.
Sometimes.
I mean, we generally are.
We try to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, do y'all want to rate this one and bring it to a close? Honestly, it is not as good as Noroi, but it's pretty great. It's one of the most unique modern found footage films I've seen in a long time, and it's got some pacing problems, but I think it accomplishes a lot, and it's genuinely pretty spooky at quite a number of times. 4.5 out of 5 for me, honestly.
On my first watch, this was a 4.5 for me as well. I think on rewatches, the pacing issues were a little more apparent. It's still a fantastic movie, though. I would still strongly recommend it. It's still in my top 15 of the year. But I'd give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah. You know, like I said, I mean, Noroi is a 5 for me. Like an easy 5, and it scares the shit out of me. It's a really terrifying film. But this movie also did, and again, I adore the world building, and I adore the scares and the execution. I have no complaints on any of the executions, whether I found them cliche, scary, or fun. Yeah, ditto that about the pacing. So I'm gonna say just half a star. I mean, if I could take off like 0.25 of a star, I would. But yeah, 4.5 for sure. Like it and well deserved.
Nice.
You know, nearly a 5, really. Like it really is a great movie.
Well, that will give Incantation an average of 4.3 out of 5. Definitely a big recommendation from all of us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one other note on that, just talking about how perfect the movie is,
yeah,
or grand and big the film is. It also sort of suffers from not feeling like found footage because of that. Like a lot of the shots are just a little bit too perfectly framed, or we just have too many shots where like the shot reverse shot, like the multiple camera setups feel just a little bit too convenient to be that well framed. And frankly, to my first viewing, I thought that there were shots that just didn't make sense in the film, and it wasn't until the second viewing I realized that the young girl's backpack, her bunny rabbit backpack, has a camera in it.
Yeah.
And that's how we were getting some of those secondary shots, because I was super confused. But
yeah.
I was like, wait, why are we cutting to another angle? There's just the one camera.
Yeah, again, man, like, I agree with you. It does feel much more artificial than most found footage horror movies, but...
You sold me on that, though. It is, because she's a YouTuber. That's a really
she's a
good
fucking
point.
YouTuber, man. Mm-hmm. It is highly manufactured, and it has this meta-referential purpose that it's trying to manipulate you to participate in the ritual, and I think that is cool.
I agree.
Well, that will at last bring 2022 to a final close, as we are now in the new year. And looking ahead, next week we're starting strong with our first new movie of 2023, Mithrigan.
We have a run of new movies coming up, man.
Yep, we've got a lot of
new shit coming out.
We've got a lot of new stuff coming out, and we're starting with the doll who knows how to whip and nay, Mithrigan. And so yeah, come back next week to hear our thoughts on Megan. Mithrigan. We'll do a real quick sponsor to ring in the new year.
Yeah, let's make it fast. All right.
We gotta get paid.
The sponsor shelf has handed me a sponsor, and the sponsor is Jeb!
Yo! Jeb! 2023!
Everybody, check under your pockets. There's a turtle in there.
Jeb!
Get hype. We got turtle pockets. We're jebbing. Jeb, 2023, he's coming back. 2024?
2023?
Yeah.
Please clap.
Please clap.
We're clapping. All right, we're jebbed. All right.
All right, thanks, Jeb.
What a wonderful current sponsor to have. Very relevant.
Yeah, right. Certainly not a dead meme from like 6 years ago.
Never.
No. Anyway, well, thanks for listening. We're looking forward to 2023 and another good year of horror. We hope you are too, and we hope you'll be here with us every week for podcast stuff.
We'll be here regardless.
Give us, that's right, talking into the void of Mother Buddha's face. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. Shout out to honorary pod boys Sam Simon and Zach Confer. Hope y'all had a delightful new year and that you're ready for some another year of spooky, scary.
Yep.
Yeah. You can follow us on Twitter at podpeoplepod and at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. You can follow me on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake and streaming twitch.tv/SomeSpookySnake. I just finished Outlast 2 recently. Think I'm going to do Resident Evil 7 next. Haven't decided 100%, but that's the direction I'm going in.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
And today's my birthday as of recording.
Heyo!
That's right. It's new. Technically we're cheating a little bit. It's not quite the New Year yet. It's New Year's Cleve.
It's New Year's Cleve, which is the day of my birth, where we all count down the end of my birthday. And it rules. It's actually very fun. And I am super happy to have a birthday today, and that's my shout out. I'm shouting out that it's my birthday.
Happy birthday to Cleveland.
Hell
and
yeah. I couldn't spend it better. Afternoon with the boys talking about movies.
And Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for listening, and hope you spent the new year getting toasty, because that's what we're doing.
We're sipping mimosas,
after this.
baby.
Toasty mimosi.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Goodbye.
Ever wanna tell the seam of someone's dream? Baby, it's fine. You said that we should just be friends. While I came up with that line, and I'm sure that it's for the best. If you ever change your mind, don't hold your breath. Look, you may not believe that, baby, I'm relieved when you said goodbye. My whole world shined. Hey, 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 it's a beautiful day, and I can't stop myself from smiling. If I'm drinking, then I'm buying, and I know there's no denying. It's a beautiful day, the sun is up, the music's playing, and even if it started raining, you won't hear this boy complaining, 'cause I'm glad that you're the one who got away. It's a beautiful day. It's my turn to